Thank you, everyone. My project is called Greener Intelligence. It's a podcast series exploring generative AI's hidden environmental costs. I was advised by Professor Chung in Questrom. Thank you, Professor Chung, for advising me, and we'll get right into it. So, as a lot of us know, in the last few years, generative AI has become huge. We talk about it all the time, and it's completely changed the way that we do things, from writing emails to the way businesses actually operate. So, as we can see here, it's looking to become a market that's valued at over $1 trillion by 2032. So as we can see here, AI is something that is here to stay and is something that's going to continue growing in the next several years. Unfortunately, generative AI comes with an extremely big environmental cost. It's very energy intensive and very water intensive. This is because generative AI is a predictive model that's trained on massive data sets to predict what's going to predict output and create human-like text, images, and more. So it's not just the training process that requires all of this data. Every single question that someone's asking an AI model also results in a lot of energy and water use through the data centers. So in these data centers, there's a lot of computers processing all of this, and these computers need to be kept cool, which also requires a lot of water. And just one ChatGPT search actually takes up 10 times the energy of a traditional Google search. And there are over 1 billion ChatGPT searches every day, which creates a significant carbon footprint. This is what the inside of a data center looks like. This is where all of that processing behind your AI searches is taking place. And this is where all of that energy consumption is taking place as well. So for my Keystone, I created a podcast series. And the goal here is to explain why generative AI is harmful to the environment, and also to create discourse and source opinions from experts on how businesses can continue to innovate and also address the environmental problem as well. And I chose a podcast because there really isn't one right answer on how we can approach this issue of how companies can continue to innovate this technology, but also staying considerate of the environment. So for my first episode, I sat down with one of my friends who's studying economics and environmental policy over at CAS. And so we discussed how generative AI is hurting the environment and also where the responsibility lies. So first, we just came to the conclusion that businesses have a responsibility to focus on sustainable development. So this includes companies that are developing these AI models as well as the ones that are using it. They need to try to come up with new ways to keep sustainability in mind in these areas. Additionally, right now, there's little to no environmental regulation in this industry. So when it comes to building AI infrastructure, there's really no policies around this to prevent the environmental harms that are coming from it. So implementing policy can also be helpful in this area. Finally, on an individual level, we can try to limit our AI use. But of course, the larger impacts do come from companies as a whole that are using this AI. For my second episode, I spoke with Professor Villegas, who is a lecturer in CDS, and he focuses on AI ethics. He also has a background in computer science, and he talked to me about how it's important to consider ethics and the environmental consequences even from the design stage. Right now, because of all of the competition in the market, companies and developers are really just trying to race to create the best possible model, and they're using brute force to just train these models and create the best possible model, and they're really haven't been thinking too much about algorithmic efficiency and prioritizing a smaller, more efficient model. It's just trying to create the best possible model out there. And so he also suggested that local deployment is an option for companies that are using AI. So instead of utilizing something like ChatGPT, a company could have an on-premise, smaller solution that meets their needs, and that would be more appropriate for their business, and that would actually help them reduce their energy costs. And then finally, he emphasized that open source innovation and transparency are really important, because if developers are trying to develop the same thing individually, it's kind of using energy repeatedly to come to the same final product. So sharing information is really important to try to alleviate that stress. In my third episode, I talked to Professor Stubbe, who is a lecturer in strategy in Questrom, and he's an expert with energy and sustainability. So he actually talked to me about how AI can improve the environment, and this would be because AI can bring a lot of process improvements to different industries, especially those that are highly polluting, like aviation and manufacturing. So when operations are streamlined and processes are made better and optimized through AI, this can actually reduce the pollution of these industries. So he's very optimistic about that. But he did also tell me about how AI is currently straining our power grids and delaying clean energy transition. So this means that companies, a lot of energy companies that were planning on actually shutting down their coal-powered plants have put that off because of the increased demand for energy from these data centers. Professor Stubbe also talked to me about another concept where companies are already working to reduce energy consumption to try to protect their bottom line. So they're trying to make their models more efficient, but as a way of saving money and reducing their costs. And so this will make AI more efficient, which sounds great because now you're using less energy. But this means that this is going to have something called the rebound effect, which means that this will lead to greater demand for AI, and the overall use of AI would actually increase. So this brought me to the conclusion that when companies are trying to reduce their energy costs, that they need to keep the environment in mind, not just their profits. Finally, I spoke to my advisor, Professor Chung, for my last episode because she's an expert with organizational culture. I wanted to understand how businesses can be more sustainable in their culture and actually operate as an entity that is caring about the environment. And she explained that changing an organization's values requires a lot of buy-in from everyone in the company from top to bottom, and that everyone needs to be involved in creating these new goals. She also emphasized that it's really important to align a company's sustainability with their long-term corporate goals. So it's not just something that's tacked on at the end or a separate responsibility that's a burden. It really needs to be part of their company's strategy. So my main takeaways here are that AI has a hidden environmental cost. Energy efficiency on its own isn't a solution if the environment isn't being kept in mind. Responsible design needs to be intentional, and organizational culture can drive sustainable change. So the next slide, I'll be playing the trailer for my podcast, and it'll have the QR code that you can scan to listen to the first episode that's out on Spotify now. Artificial intelligence is everywhere. It's writing our essays, helping us draft emails, answering our questions, and it's even shaping the future of business. But behind all of the convenience and efficiency that it offers, there's a side that we don't talk about enough, the very real environmental cost. I'm Neha, and on Greener Intelligence, I'll be diving into how generative AI is straining our energy grids, draining our water supplies, and challenging how we think about innovation. Each episode, I'll be sitting down with students or experts to unpack what's happening, why it matters, and how we can all make smarter, more sustainable choices as this technology continues to grow. Because AI is changing the world, but it's up to us to decide what kind of world it creates. Listen to Greener Intelligence now on Spotify. Thank you.
We now have time, 4 minutes for questions right here.
I just want to ask a really great presentation. What inspired you to kind of look at the sustainability aspect of AI?
Yeah. So last summer, I interned at a tech company, and I think it really exposed me to how important AI is, especially in that industry. So like all of these companies are kind of racing to develop the best new technology, and that is important to like stay innovating. But someone actually on one of the company calls asked about how this was going to affect the environment. I was like, wait, what? Like AI affects the environment? So I was just like really intrigued by that because I didn't really even know that there was such an impact from that because you're not physically seeing the emissions that are coming from you searching on ChatGPT. So I thought that was really interesting. And I also think that it's important as like a student in the business school to be aware of things like this because I don't think it's touched on enough. Yeah.
Yeah, really great presentation. And I was just wondering, like, do you think it's anyone's specific responsibility to sort of educate the masses about like the environmental effects of AI? Because, like you said, I had no idea that like ChatGPT, for example, like affected the environment more than Google. I didn't even really think about the fact that Google did. Like, do you think like it's the government's responsibility or sort of environmental activists? Or?
I think it's a up to people to sort of have discussions on these sorts of things. I think it's also easy to still know that there's an environmental cost and just to ignore it when you're not seeing the consequences. I think it's the case for a lot of environmental issues, not just with this, that it's just a matter of just like people who are passionate actually having conversations and telling other people. Yeah, it is really difficult when you can't visualize an impact to talk about it. But yeah, I think it's up to just people who care to actually talk about it. Yeah.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. Yeah.
Thanks so much for your presentation. You mentioned in one of your episodes that people can work on not using AI as much to prevent the environmental costs. But I'm wondering, as AI continues to be infiltrated in our resources to the point where we may not even be able to prevent that, what are some other ways that we as consumers can do a better job of making selections in what we use online?
Yeah, definitely. We were actually talking about that last night when I was practicing presenting this. I think it's definitely like difficult because now AI is embedded even into the Google search, because it used to be like not like you didn't have to use it, but now if you type something into Google, there's the Gemini AI overview, and even on Instagram there's Meta AI in everything. So it definitely is a challenge, and I think like the number one important thing is to just be conscious of what's happening, and then when we are like, if you do end up like working for a company like this, to sort of just hold people accountable. But I think like as consumers, it is going to be increasingly difficult to try to avoid things like that. But I do know that it's like people do still use like ChatGPT every day to like do their homework and things like that. So I think that's where the use can be cut down. But I do think it's up to corporations to actually consider this ethical issue and whether it's necessary for them to implement AI into everything. Or I think it would be great if you could turn off the AI overview feature for people to decide whether they want to use it or not. So I think it only so much of it can be controlled by the consumer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.